In this movie, we'll take a look at a few examples of how we can use selective color in order to modify and change the colors in our photographs. We'll start off with this photograph here, which is a picture of a hand-painted sign. I love hand-painted signs because that's what my grandfather did for a living. With this image, I want to bring out the reds and also change the yellows a little bit. In order to do that, we'll use selective color. Yet before we start off with selective color, I find it's helpful to brush up on color theory a little bit so that we can understand best how to work with the selective color controls. To brush up on our color theory, let's turn on this color layer and then click on the icon for selective color. You'll find it in the bottom row in the adjustments panel. All right, well, here in the selective color controls, you can see we can target specific colors. Click on the pull-down menu, we can work on the yellows, the greens, the cyans. And as we select a color to work on, we then have controls. Each of these controls allow us to modify certain colors. Notice that the first slider is called cyan, the next one magenta, then yellow and black. Well, if you know a thing or two about color theory, you may know that colors have complementary colors. Let's focus our attention on this little color wheel. Well, the complementary color to cyan, well, that's red. Therefore, this cyan slider, what it actually allows us to do is to increase the cyan if we drag it to the right, or to decrease the cyan if we drag it to the left, which in turn is adding red. So this slider allows us to work with cyan here or red over here. What about magenta? Here we can add more magenta or we can add more green. The yellow slider, well, that slider allows us to work with our yellows and our blues. Now, even if you don't know very much about color theory, all that you need to know is that each slider allows us to modify colors in a different way. And what we can do is we can sort of mix these sliders together in order to come up with some interesting and unique color looks in our photographs. All right, well, let's turn off this layer here so we can work on our image. As I mentioned, what I want to do is change the characteristics of the reds. So here, I'll go to the reds by clicking on the red channel. Next, I'll modify the color. Now, if we drag to the right, that's going to add more cyan. In turn, it's going to, in a sense, remove the red. It gives a bit more of a gritty look. Well, that isn't what I want. I want bright, vibrant reds. So I'll drag this to the left, and here we can see it's sort of lit up those reds so they're more saturated, a little bit more vibrant. Next, we have magenta. If we drag this to the left, what that's going to do is make the image a bit more orange. Drag it to the right, and it's going to bring out more of the red. Now, each color will respond differently to the way that we work with these sliders, so what you may need to do is just drag them and then see how it looks. In this case, with the yellow slider, I don't want to drag it to the left. I do want to drag it to the right. Now we're talking. Now we have this beautiful bright red. All right, what about the black slider? Drag to the left and you can lighten the reds. Drag to the right and you can darken those. Underneath, we have two options for relative and absolute. In most situations, relative will work better because it will take the color where it is, and relative to that spot, it'll make a change. Absolute makes more bold or dynamic changes. So with most photographs, I find that relative typically works better, whereas absolute may be a bit over the top. Well, what about working on the yellows? Here we can click on this pull-down menu and then choose yellows. In this case, let's jump straight to the yellow slider. Here we can either remove some of the yellow or we can bring that up. Now, you won't always just use one slider. Typically, you'll work on other sliders, and here you can see how we can swing the yellow, I should say. Here, I'll drag this to the left because I want a little bit of a brighter yellow there. Here's before and after. The cyan slider isn't going to do very much for our yellows, yet it does sort of tint it just a touch, so you may modify that a little bit. But you'll discover that certain sliders won't affect certain colors, and you'll just need to drag those, again, one way and then the other. What about brightening these up? Well, we can do that, or we can darken those down a little bit with this slider here. All right, well, let's look at our results. Here they are, the before and then now the after. So as you can see, selective color allows you to really target those colors and make changes in unique ways. All right, well, now that we've seen this example and also talked a little bit about how selective color works, let's go ahead and take a look at a few more examples, and let's do that in the next movie.